Hello, and welcome to the Space Between Ideas. I'm Blank Gates. Welcome to a beautiful day here in the land of Georgia. We're still not getting the. Oh, it's my earphones. Crazy. All right, let me just plug these back. Let's leave it like this. Okay, so let's get started. Now I just need to move this one little window. All right, so today we're gonna answer the question. There's I made a video a couple days ago, and in the video there was another channel that popped up on my YouTube feed, and I thought what the guy was talking about was interesting. It's connected to a project that I was working on, and so I thought it was really interesting what they were talking about. And then I also kind of pointed out some areas that like I was thinking about, so I thought maybe that there was an opportunity there to make some comments. And then it turned into a conversation. So this is what it says. I think you can see it. Yeah. All right. So this guy on Bright, he's got to tell me how to say his name. Bright Lee, because now that I see it, it says Brightly Adventures. Brightly, Brightly. See, but then like depends on how you look at when you look at his channel, it's separated between Brightly and then Adventures. Anyways, so he says, Blaine, I agree that the one prompt idea is broken. It's an ongoing journey, iteration, testing, debugging, etc. Then there is the attention capture. How do you raise awareness of what you built? Determine the monetization strategy, the way that people want to buy, target audience, etc. So this is a pretty big, it's a pretty big question. This is like the question of like, how do you make a working business? And this is the question that everybody's trying to solve. Is like, how do I go from zero to hero? Um, the short answer is I don't know, like because that I'm like literally trying to make my own business, and I've been working on these projects for lots and lots of years, and um, although I'm able to make enough money to live here in Georgia, the country Georgia, next to Russian and Azerbaijan, my business is currently not making enough money for me to live back in Canada, which is not very uh, exciting because, well, my mom, she sent me a message the other day and she's like, "Hey, your dad's turning 75. We're going to have a family reunion next summer. So you need to come home." It's like, "What? Come home?" So and I also did this before. I lived in China for 10 years and like just focused on, I went to law school in China and then I was working for a couple of different companies. So I had that all like focused on that. And then suddenly it just ended after 10 years. And then, so this recent trip, so from Canada, I went from Canada to Russia and then Belarus. And then I started working online. And then I've traveled to 15 countries since then. And now I'm here. And I've put like the whole purpose. I remember when I went to Russia, actually, I flew business class, and the idea was like, I'm going to go make a business. And like, I wanted to have that idea really clear in my mind. And then now my mom's kind of like put the bookend on it. And she said, listen, you need to come home and come to your dad's thing. And the other thing is I need to go home anyways, like because now I have the business model and I have an understanding of how to do business. And like I have all of the thinking tools and the thinking methodologies, and I have it all figured out in my head. And now it's like just the process of turning it into daily habits and doing those little habits and putting up systems and creating processes. And then as I'm able to build the processes, then I'm slowly going to be able to use different techniques in order to automate those systems and to hire other people to do those systems. So there's like a whole process, and I can see it all. I have it all planned out in the future, and now it's just a step-by-step process to get things going. So the first issue in this question is actually like attention capture. That's I don't think that's the first problem. Raising awareness of what you built is not the same. It's not the first problem. Monetization strategy, yeah, that's getting closer to the first problem. Target audience, yeah, so that is like monetization strategy and target audience. Those are the first the most important issues. So now I've just put a bunch of like I've opened up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 tabs. I've opened up 12 tabs on my computer. We're going to go through these tabs one by one. And when we get to the last tab, then we're going to ask Google Gemini to help us to answer some questions. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go through these tabs one by one because what we actually want is we need to create the questions. I don't know exactly what the questions are. I have some ideas of what the questions could be, but that is the beginning of learning. It's the questions. All right, so let's begin. Now, the thing is that these 12 tabs. So in the first tab, what I'm going to talk about is just like my understanding of business in general. So we're going to look at the company in terms of like three different elements. What are the three elements of a business? And then after we talk about the three elements of business, we're going to talk about deliberate practice. So like each of those elements of business, how do they break down into functions? And then once we break them down into functions, then how do we develop those functions? Then we're going to talk about the general model. It's called Buckholtz drive model, which is going to help us to understand that the main issue that we're facing is we have a lack of competitiveness. And so we talk about what are the elements to improve and increase our competitiveness. And then we're going to go into the product launch roadmap, which is going to explain like basically that if you want to run a business, there's three areas where we need to focus. And then that's going to help us to zero in on the concept of your target audience. Now, after that, we're going to talk about the monetization strategy of the current business that I'm running and how I came up with that monetization strategy. Then we're going to look at the inbound marketing and sales funnel. We're going to look at the concept of a growth engine. Then we're going to look at how the deliberate practice model can be used to zero in on this concept of a growth engine and how to improve our growth engine. And then we're going to go back to some of Tom Buckholtz's work about when you're developing processes, how do you move from no process to like an actual process? And then we're going to jump back into this project. So this gentleman, um, what was it? Brightly, Brightly Ventures. He has a similar project idea as me. And so there is an opportunity to talk and to cooperate and try to figure out where my project may have some overlap with his project. And from my perspective, like the actual business that I'm building now, the thing I've been doing, I mean, I say it's a co-founder. I use this book, Create Crucial Insight, and I've been doing it for for like 10 years, trying to build a thinking model based on this book. So, and over this time period, I've spoken a lot to the author of this book, and he's given me different pointers and different direction. And like, does he have a hands-on approach to this whole process? No, not at all. He's really focused on dark energy and dark matter, and he's publishing in physics journals, and he's trying to change the way that people think about physics. And I've been really focused on this book, and like I share with him what's going on, and most of the time he's like, okay, keep going. Because why? Because where's the product? Like until you have a product, there's no business. So what we're trying to do in this whole discussion today is we're trying to talk about like what is product. Like the other things will come if you have a product. The monetization strategy, well, where's the product? It's like it's the stickiness of the product. What problem are you trying to solve? And then how easy is it for people to use that solution? And then if they are like, wow, your solution is so awesome, then the product sells itself. I mean, yeah, I mean, it is true that there were some situations like electricity where like a lot of people they weren't really interested in electricity. There's like there's like a lot of different inventions over time where people were just kind of like, I don't know about that. And then so you have to have some amount of marketing to get the thing going. It's like it's like priming the pump. So I agree that there is a necessity to prime the pump, and a lot of the time you're going to need some capital for that. And that's where all these like professional incubators, like YC, and other types of early startup venture capitalists are going to pump some money into your project, and then they're going to connect you with the people who are already in the system. See, the idea is that like there's this layer of the internet where the actual businesses which are running and functioning right now, they exist and they control, they're the gatekeepers, and you're trying to like get into there. And the question is, can you get into there through these venture capitalist gatekeepers, or are you just going to rock the boat and you're going to somehow get in there without having all those connections? So it's a good question. And but the most important thing is that like until you have a product that they so the things that these guys, they have millions and millions of dollars. They've seen millions and millions of different startup ideas. And if you cannot get them excited about your product, if you can't get the startup guys excited about your product, then like why are you going to trust your own intuition? Like there's a guy, he's talked to 100,000 investors. He's invested his own personal money in 1,000 of those ventures. He watched as 80% of those ventures died and only 20% or 10% or 5% of those ventures succeeded. So, like, I think it would be interesting to get his advice. That's why I think that the like people who are trying to start a business all by themselves without, especially in tech, without this concept of like, how are you going to get funded from a startup company or a venture capitalist firm? I think it's misguided. I think that your main focus is like build a product that has like which is so awesome that somebody in the startup community is willing to give you money. And it's not just money because it's going to be the connections. And it's like it's because they already have, like, imagine you have a computer and then you design a new computer chip and then you go in and you're like, hey, guess what, my computer chip is better. And they're like, oh really, let me see. Then you say see, and then they're like, okay, now let me plug it in. Okay, plug it in, and then think, whoa, the computer is better. So if you actually have like a good product which makes the world a better place, then sure, somebody is going to plug that in. So if you think about like language learning, this is this huge, huge, huge market. There's lots of huge companies that are drilling down and doing research and are using trying to figure out best practices. There's schools literally everywhere. Like, what do we have more on the earth than anything else? It's education. This is like the number one thing in the world is education. So the question is, how do you educate? Like this morning I just had a conversation with a gentleman from Russia, and he's living now in France, and we were talking about authoritarian governments, and we were talking about what are some of the different strategies for helping countries that are looked at as evil, so the authoritarian governments, the dictatorships, these non-free countries, and how do we give them freedom? And it seems like the main idea was like, okay, so what we do is we go in and we kill them. What? That's the answer? Yeah, we gotta go in and kill all the people in control. But then what's the problem? But then he's like, well, but then you have the people who are left, because they lived in this authoritarian environment, then it means that they never had the ability to exercise their rights and values. And so they don't know what it means to become civilly active. So they never grew up in a situation where they were asked to like participate in community development. They were never asked to create groups of people to go solve a social problem. They didn't grow up in some religious environment where they were asked to give public speeches. They never confronted a bully and had to like stand their ground. And so like then in this environment, you think suddenly the people are just going to magically change. So the idea is that the education system in America, when I was growing up, it was such that we were taught about these values and we were asked to participate, and so we had these institutions that helped us develop these characteristics. And that is all connected with education. So education, yeah, I agree. Education is that's number one. Education. You get born into a family and suddenly the parents are like, Okay, what are we gonna do here? Like, for example, this dang dog who's just sitting underneath me right now. He's totally useless, because you watch those videos and the dogs are doing backflips and shaking their paws and rolling over, and they could do all kinds of things. They know like 200 commands. You know how many commands my dog knows? He knows one. I say sit, and he sits. I say his name, and he runs away. He doesn't even come using his own name. So it's like I have to negotiate with him every time I want him to come over. Like I have to like pretend to walk away and then be like, "You better get over here. I'm walking away." He's like, "What? Are you walking away?" So it's like and then it's like I'm teaching the way that I teach him is like totally wrong. And I don't know how to teach the dog. There's lots of websites I could go to. There's lots of YouTube channels. Like, which one do I pick? So this is the issue when you're saying like attention, how to raise awareness, and then what the way people want to target. So that okay, so that like I said, the issue is the target audience, and then also the like what is the product? How does the product resolve the person's problem? How do you create awareness? Those are good questions. One is I call it the corporate menu. It's really simple. And it's just this idea that, hey, look at this. It fits. So it's this idea that when a company has to do things, the company in general is making, informing, and implementing decisions. So, what are the roles inside of a company? This comes from the work of Thomas J. Buckholtz. He had a blog post, which I can't find anymore, but it was an awesome blog post. And I read it and I was like, yeah, I see that. And then I started teaching it. The more I taught it, the less pushback I got until finally, see, this is the thing. I just teach and teach and teach until I don't get any pushback. And then people are like, okay, yeah, I see that. And then it becomes something. So we got Lisa the brain, Pinky in the brain. And remember, so Pinky, he uses his hands and he has more practical answers. The brain is usually about huge strategies and big ideas, and a lot of them don't work. And you have to go back into Pinky to get the solution finally. And then we got Lisa, who's got these big eyes and a big heart, and she's actually really good at getting everything done. She's really active. She's good at getting things, you know, pushing things till the very end. She succeeds a lot more often than these two gentlemen do. And that's why she is in this position. So on the left side, we got the executive and the manager. The executive has the vision and the direction of the company, which is the kind of decision about like, so this is the front of the ship. Where are we going? And then the heart is the managing people and processes with infrastructure. So you can see that the heart, it's about pumping blood throughout the system to keep everything going and alive. It's a piece of infrastructure to keep our bodies alive. A lot of people that are more emotional, they're like, it's the heart of the company, like it's keeping people together, it's the emotions, it's the helping people understand the vision. Yeah, I like that idea too. Now, in the next section, we got the brain, which is the thinking frameworks and data analysis. So, how are these executives going to be making decisions? They have to be informed. See, the question, let's say that there's a meeting between the executive and the manager, and the executive says, okay, so did you double check that potential solution? He wants to know, she wants to know, are the systems that you are managing helping our company move in the direction of the vision? And then the manager has to say yes. And then they say, well, how do you know? Did you double check potential solutions? All right. So, oh, time is it? Why am I getting an alarm at 11? Why did I set up this alarm in the first place? Okay. So, so the manager says, okay, well, I'm going to go in, I'm going to have a chat with the coach and the analyst. So they go into the chat and they say, all right, let's have a meeting. And they say, okay, so what can we do? And then how can we do it? And then how sure are we? And then the analyst and the coach, they're like, okay, so this is what we need to do, and then this is how we're going to implement that decision, and this is how the system is going to change. Or these are my ideas, and good. The manager says what? So the only thing the manager says is, have we double checked potential solutions? So that's what the manager learned from the executive. So the manager goes into the meeting and says, well, did you double check the potential solutions? So they said, we're sure at like 80%. We know what to do. We know how to do it. We're sure at 80%. Well, 80%, that's not enough. Let's double check these potential solutions. All right. So then the coach and the analyst, they have to go down into the hands. They have to say, all right, guys, you guys are following orders and rules. Tell us what's happening and what do we have to work with? And so then the technicians are like, well, this is what we're doing. We're doing the service, we're doing the production, we're working with the product, we're creating the product, or we're using tools to provide the service. And say, all right, so how can we make that better? And then we go into the clerks and say, all right, you guys are processing transaction, working with the paperwork. Is there something that we can do here to improve the situation so you can provide a better environment for our technicians? Okay, good. And then we go into the librarian. Okay, so show us the data. We need to look at the data. Help us look at the data and understand the data, which is based on the work that the technicians and the clerks are doing. All right, we got everything. All right, so now what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? How sure are we? We improved our ideas. We double checked the potential solutions. And then the manager says, did you double check yeah, we double checked the potential solutions. Okay, then the manager goes, it's a small company. The manager can actually go in and say, all right, so these are the solutions that the analyst, this is the data the analyst gave me. All right, librarian and clerk and technician, can you help me to verify this data? And then this is the potential solution that the coach gave us for how we should use these thinking frameworks and create some kind of change in our system. And what do you guys think about that? And they're like, yeah, it looks this, that, the other. And they're like, good. So then the manager goes back to the executive and says, okay, so I double checked the potential solution. I talked to the coach and the analyst who talked to the technician, clerk, and librarian. I double checked the solution by talking to the technician, clerk, and librarian. Here's what we're going to do. And then the executive says, great, let's do it. So who are you? If you're the executive that's just like wants to say, great, let's do it, then that's fine. That's wonderful. Like, congratulations, you're the guy. You made it to the top. You have great managers. Your managers have very working the system very well. They know how to communicate with everybody in the organization, and you trust fully your managers. That's a wonderful thing. But unfortunately for me, I'm like, it's a one-man show. So, I'm all these positions. All right. Now the question is, so we have an understanding of the three main functions of a business. Who are these guys? Of how they break down into these different roles. Question is, how do we then break these roles down into smaller parts? Like, how do we have a good functioning thing? For example, an analyst. All right. So later we're going to look at an example of how do we break down the analyst into smaller pieces? What are the three categories of an analyst? Right? We know the three-quarter categories for a corporation, but now we go into one of the functions of the thinking framework, data analysis, specifically data analysis. We want to break that down into another one of these charts where we have what are the three main functions of an analyst? Now, how are we going to break that down? So we break practice. Now, deliberate practice, it's an idea that was taught by a guy named Anders Ericsson, and this is the video that's on the Amazon.com YouTube channel talking about what's the difference between deliberate practice and naive practice. And the main concept here is that, for example, like you got to answer a question. So here's the question: what skills do you need to succeed? So I want to be a football player. In Canada, we call this a soccer player, but most of the world calls it a football player. All right, so what do you need? Well, you need physical fitness, you need ball handling skills, and spatial awareness. It's like, okay, good. So how now what does the analyst actually do? So the analyst is going to be um, measuring. The analyst job is to measure. I think I had this conversation with somebody last week. I don't remember who I was talking to about it. All right, so we'll just keep on going. So the job of the analyst is to measure, and measure what? Well, then we talk to let's talk to the thinking framework and data analysis guy. So that's the coach. So we talk to the coach and we say, all right, coach, what are we going to measure regarding physical fitness? And he says, well, we could measure speed and power and strength and endurance and agility. It's like, yeah, how do we measure that? And they're like, oh. So we have our sub items. We actually have to take it down all the way down to the level of elements. So what kind of speed can we measure? We can measure acceleration, we can measure deceleration, we can measure top speed, we can measure endurance at a particular speed. Great, perfect. So we just used our coach and our technician to understand that physical fitness is one of the elements that we need to improve, one of the categories to become a better football player. And then we broke it down into sub items, and then we have the specific element of acceleration. Now, according to Anders Ericsson, now we have to design an exercise that will help me improve my acceleration. And so we what we do is we have four pylons, and then I just sprint from the first pylon to the second pylon, and then like once I pass the pylon, then I start jogging, and then slowly start to walk. Then I get to this pylon here, and then sprint over to this one, and then same thing. So then once I hit the second pylon, then I start to slow down, and then I start walking again, and I reach this pylon. So from here to here, it's a sprint. From here to here, it's slow down. From here to here, it's a sprint. From here to here, it's slow down. And then we're just doing this. So we do this exercise until a certain number of times, and then over time, we can improve our acceleration. Ding, ding. All right, so we have two different things that we just learned. So one is that we can use the coach methodology from this. So the coach provides coaching, which and so they provide encouragement, motivation, let's do those sprints. They also provide thinking frameworks to break down how should we understand how do we improve as a football player, and then also specifically what's the exercise to improve as a football player. The analyst provides the data, and then over time, by improving our acceleration, then we can improve the subcategory of speed, which improves the category of fitness. And it's so with all of the elements. For example, ball handling skills. Okay, so what do we want to improve? We want to control quickness. Well, what type of quickness? Quickness when dribbling. Okay, so let's design an exercise to improve our dribbling quickness. So the coach creates the exercise, and the analyst measures the result. All right, now, so into this world of the Buckholtz drive model, and the question is, well, how do we actually win events? How do we win? How do we get success? And it means that we have to have our team name is called Honeybee, Honeybee, which means we have a high level of effort, a diligent level of effort, and we also have a leading level, a high level of success. How do we get the diligent? So this is about motivation. And the question is, how do you get enough motivation into your team to get them to do the exercises? So it's one thing to understand we need to create exercises. And it's another thing to get people to do the exercises. Like right now, I have a little bit of extra weight. Now I don't even need deliberate practice to understand that there are two main factors about this, maybe three. So the first one I'm not going to really worry about, which is your actual genetics. So there's something about the types of things that you eat and the way that you exercise that could influence the successfulness of those two activities. But just for simplicity, we're going to say that the secret of managing your weight is four words: eat less, move more. Eat less and move more. That's it. Eat less, move more. All right. So the question is, how are you going to motivate yourself to eat less? Even right now, I'm kind of hungry. And how are you going to motivate yourself to move more? That's it. So, what's your level of effort when it comes to eating less? And what's your level of effort when moving more? For me, I would say I'm around two, maybe three. I take my dog outside like 4 times a day. We went outside already this morning. We will go out again at 2 o'clock, and then we'll go out again at 7 o'clock, and we'll go out again at 11:30 at night. Well, I guess it's 10:30 now. And I used to run actually at 10:30. We used to jog. We used to jog 4 kilometers every day. And I don't know what happened. Something happened. Did an experiment where I was eating baby formula, I think, and then I just gained all this weight, and then it started hurting my knees, and then it's just the whole thing. So now the problem is actually I don't need to move more. I need to eat less. I'm in the eat less phase. And how motivated am I to eat less? In fact, I have zero motivation to eat less. I love to eat. I love it. You see? Motivation. We have to figure out how to solve this motivation issue. Now, you could go deeper and you could go into the like the Fogg's motivation model to talk about the difference between a facilitation trigger and a spark trigger. So, why is it that I'm having a hard time eating less? And it's because what? It's because it's a difficult behavior and what? I'm super motivated? No, it's because it's a boring behavior. I don't really care about it. And also, it's is it difficult to eat less? I mean, I think maybe it is difficult to eat less because uh, there's pain involved. So I'm here. I'm in the no action zone, and we want to. It's kind of weird, right? Because I'm trying to figure out how to actively eat less. Anyways, now in business, we're mostly trying to set up systems, and so we're not so worried about like the level of effort because if you're using artificial intelligence, if you're using a software solves a lot of these problems because you don't have to encourage your AI to give you an answer. You just ask for the answer and it provides the answer. The issue is then how do you develop systems and then how, yeah, so you have to create systems and then you have to figure out what parts of the systems are people going to handle and what parts of the systems are the computers going to handle. But the more important part is this. So, okay, now we increased our level of effort. We're a hamster. So, the ant, why an ant? Because the ant, they work like crazy, pick up the paper and the trash. But I mean, picking up paper and trash, if it's not necessarily like the whole business. Sometimes when I talk to people about like, you know, we often use the example I'm talking about because becomes really useful. Like for example, we could say, okay, so um, who are the technicians in a grocery store? And people are like, "What? Well, okay, we the guy who cleans things." No, I'm not talking about that. So the issue is we need to understand the core business. When we talk about a grocery store, of course, you have something called facilities management, but that's not what we're talking about. When we talk about a grocery store, we're talking about the core business service, which is what? It's actually logistics. It's a logistics company. So what do is they get the package at the back of the building. They put the package into the storage, and then they take the storage package from the storage and they put it onto the shelf. And then you are hired as a technician. You go into the building and you choose which product you want. You take it to the clerk. Then the clerk scans it, and then you take the product from the clerk to your car, and then you drive it home. So it's a logistics company. What about Amazon.com? Same thing. What's the only difference between Amazon.com and a grocery store? The last mile. So instead of see, like, look, so here's Amazon.com and here's the local grocery store. So you have some tomatoes. The tomatoes are put onto a truck. Then the truck takes it to some kind of distribute some kind of collective, and then the collective puts it into a container. And the container gets shipped over to your country, and then part of the container of those come to a local distribution center, and then from the local distribution center, one goes to the Amazon factory and one goes to the grocery store, and then from there you click a button on your computer or you go to the grocery store and then you select the item, and then somebody, either you or somebody else at the Amazon's factory, is going to put the package pass through the clerk and then into a vehicle and drive it to your place. So that's the last mile. The only difference is who's driving the car, who takes the product from the shelf and puts it into the box, and who takes it to the clerk and who puts it into the truck. That's it. That's the only difference. It's a logistics company. I don't know what I'm talking about now. Take out the papers and the trash. All right. So in a grocery store, when we talk about, we're not actually talking about who is cleaning the floor and that's a completely different service. You could outsource that. You could hire a company to come in and clean your physical facilities, or fix the physical facilities. I'm not talking about the business of property management. I'm talking about the business of logistics when I talk about a grocery store. So yeah, of course, a grocery store is a collection of a variety of businesses, but we have to understand the nature of the business. Once we understand the nature of the business, then we can focus on the specific ability, skills, knowledge, behaviors, methods, and competencies which are required to move your ability to manage that business service and take it from a low level of success to a high level of success. So you need to turn that ant into a honeybee. You got to give that ant wings, the ability to make honey, right? So a honeybee is much more productive than an ant, although honeybees, they don't do the same function. But anyways, the point is not to pick it apart until you don't have like a concept. So competing. So we get into this area of competing. Now, once you get into the area of competing, now we're talking about our good buddy from Canada, Jordan Peterson. So we go into Jordan Peterson's concept of the lobster lesson. Then what we understand is that humans, companies, organisms are trying to go up the dominance hierarchy. They need to go up the competence hierarchy. And sometimes what happens when lobsters fight each other, there's a winner and a loser, and the loser has a decrease of serotonin. And so if you give the lobster some antidepressants to pump up that serotonin, he's more likely to what? So he's more likely to win the fight. So they go back and fight again. They go back and maybe even win. So what we want is confident lobsters. We need to have a company which is winning. We need to create systems which produce results. And when we do that, then people that work for your organization become more competent, they become more dominant, and your business gets stronger and stronger. And over time, as you learn how to automate your business from competing to coasting, because you're going to develop your dominance and you're going to be getting yourself a competitive advantage. And that's why I mentioned like these tech companies, you have to understand how to work with them because they already have a competitive advantage. You're going into their forest. They are the lions, they are the eagles. And how is it that you play in their territory? We go into the other question, like the idea that Brightly Adventures was talking about. It sounds way better when you put the two words together, Brightly Adventures. So he was saying, like, okay, so how do you capture attention? How do you raise awareness? How do you decide on a monetization strategy? Things like that. Who's your target audience? And what happens here is all of us, we kind of start here in the bottom corner. We're all kind of like employees. We I don't own the business product. I don't own the product or service. Also, I don't own the website or the store. And then you have to decide, okay, so are you going to work on your ability to do marketing first? So you jump into drop shipping where you're not worried about the product so much and you're selling other people's products in order to develop your ability to sell products. Or are you going to move over to one of these places that provide a network like the Amazon fulfillment centers, or for example, udemy.com or Preply? So if you go to udemy.com, then you can focus 100% on producing courses. If you go to preply.com, you can focus 100% on your ability to teach. So you're really focusing on the product or service. And these platforms, they help you to compete. So if you made a product, you can put it, for example, like I wrote a children's book that I've never published. And I contacted some publishing companies and they just said no. So if I'm so certain that my awesome book is going to be successful, then why don't you just publish it on Kindle? Because Kindle is a platform where you can put your product and then you can compete with other products. So you can 100% focus on your product, or you can 100% focus on your ability to do marketing and marketing other people's products. Eventually you get over here where, okay, so you are producing the product and you have some kind of place, so like you have either a real store or you have like an online store, but basically what we're talking about is building the product, and then we're talking about logistics. And then the thing is that marketing then enables people to find your store and get access to your product or service. Eventually you're going to be up in this top right hand corner. So when you ask this question about like how do you capture attention? Well, that's marketing. How do you create awareness? That's marketing. How do you create a monetization strategy? Well, that's product. And how do you and a way people are going to buy? That's product, or that's platform maybe. And your target audience, well, that is product and also platform and also marketing. So it's like everything goes back to these three elements. So where do we start? I think that, first of all, I think that a price doesn't really matter if you haven't got the other two right. So then the other two, it's like your profile. So you have to have the product user experience. So your website has to be on point, and also your product has to be on point. So then we also, when we talk about profile, we're talking about inbound marketing. When we talk about inbound marketing, now we're talking about sales funnel. And okay, but where do we start? These are the three different areas, but like how, here's the product, and then here's the profile. You see, here's the brick and mortar store, website, point of sale. Here's the marketing, sales funnel, salespeople. So where does it all start? I think it always starts with the value proposition. It always starts with the actual product. Now, it doesn't matter if you have a perfect product if you don't know how to do the marketing. So, like, where do you start? Like, do you start selling other people's products so you get really good at selling products? And then it doesn't matter if your product is like not the best product because you're so good at marketing that you can still sell it? Or do you start with the product, but if you only focus on your product, maybe your product gets so good that like it's so awesome, it's so amazing, but I don't know anything about marketing and I can't get anybody to fund my company and I can't get anyone to, I don't know how to get people on my site, and I just, it's such an awesome product, but nobody knows about it. So that's the issue, right? You got to figure out how to balance these things. And but there's an answer to this question. And the answer to this question is called what? It's called the value proposition. So discuss the user experience, discuss how the user experience gives the user value. Why are people paying for this user experience? What other offers are on the market? How does the user experience differ between companies? Those are some questions that you want to ask. See, the thing is that this is the difference between blue ocean and red ocean strategy. A blue ocean means like there's no competitors, right? So this is me when I went to China. I walk into China, this is a blue ocean. Why? You're saying there's no competition in China? Listen, I'm 6'3". I got red hair. You should see what my beautiful red hair looked like when, 10 years ago when I first arrived in China. So, maybe no, when I first arrived in China, I was 24. And then like the thing is that like I learned Chinese really quickly. And so then I went to Shanghai and then I'm like, hey, I want to do a law degree in Shanghai. And then I'm like applied for I passed the language proficiency exam. Guess how many people attended the language proficiency exam that wanted to study law in Shanghai? 10. There were 10 people. And then guess what the amount of people that they wanted, foreigners they wanted in their program? 50. Okay, so this is the number one of the, like, so it's in the top 3. So it's the number 1 university in Shanghai. It's in the top 3 in the country. So number 1 is Beida, number 2 is probably Tsinghua. These are both in Beijing, and then number 3 is Fudan. 我是复旦人，你是复旦人. So I became a Fudan Ren, Fudan Ren, Fudan person. So I'm a graduate of Fudan University in Shanghai. Like, I don't think people understand the nature of a human like me. I went to Shanghai. I learned their language. I lived with Chinese people. I consumed their culture. Not like all their culture, but like I was there. I was in like the, what's happening in China at that time. I was there. I was smelling their air. I was drinking their water. I was eating their food. I was in class with Chinese people. I have Chinese teachers. Everything. Like, I don't think you understand the power that the Chinese people have when they provide educational systems for a foreigner. Like, what do you think is going to happen? I'm going to become enemies with China? What do you? These people gave me everything that I have. I went over to their country as a loser. And every day they said, Blaine, you are handsome, you are smart, you are interesting, we love you. That's all I heard for 10 years. These Chinese people gave me all of this positive motivation and said, work hard, you can do it. And so I did it. Like every day I woke up and I just worked a little bit harder. And there was always these people, Blaine, you're so handsome. Oh, you're so nice. Oh, you're so smart. Oh, come to our university. And all the teachers were nice and all the administrators were nice. And I was like trying to solve problems. And then like, okay, I want to drive a motorcycle. Well, you can't drive a motorcycle unless you get a motorcycle license. Okay. Well, you can't get a motorcycle license unless, there's all these things and you got to go to these lessons. So I go to these lessons and then I pass the lessons. They give me like the motorbike license says that I'm a citizen of China because they didn't have the ability to change like the nationality on the motorbike license. And they did it for me. They did all these things for me. They opened so many doors for me that would not have been possible in any other way. Like my whole life, there's like a couple of major influences in my life and my ability to understand China and the gifts that they gave me for 10 years of my life through education. I don't think people understand my relationship with China. What I'm talking about is the power of education. All right. So we go into the Porter's five forces. And the thing is that Porter has three of these really interesting forces. One is called threat of new entrants, rivalry among existing competitors, and threat of substitutes. Now, this is all the same thing. It doesn't really matter. You can break it down into three things. Like every single slide, I've always break things down into three things. But the main issue is what is the element of the value proposition? So the thing is that in my so I have two different product ideas, and one of them is educational based, but the one I'm working on right now is so I just realized, okay, so one of the main points of my product idea is something I call a scoreboard. Now, I didn't know actually at the time when I created the scoreboard that there were these other companies like Money.com and Asana and Jira. I had no idea. I came to this this idea independently. I was like, "Hey guys, did you ever try making a task list and having statuses next to that with a person and a date?" It was so ridiculous. But when will this person do this item? This is like the key to success. When will this person do this item? So, if you're talking about like a product for helping people to learn a language, I would say that this is also the same. This is the foundation of success. If you can't get a person to come into your app and go through an exercise, then you failed. That's it. If you can't get a person to come into your store and buy a product, you failed. If you can't get a person to open up your application and use it like in a predictable pattern, and a predictable time period, then you failed. Like this is life right here. There's a task, there's a status, there's a person, there's a date. When's this person going to do this item? Like for example, like today, I'm making a video. I made the video. Like I call it 10 o'clock in Tbilisi. Now today I was a little bit late. Sometimes I'm late. The dog just seemed like he needed to go outside. But I mean, you have to create a habit, and then you create that habit, and slowly you make progress. And if you're not creating habits and you're not making progress, then your product is going to fail. So that's the first question. We're not talking. We're just still the question before target audience is how are you going to establish habits? So then that takes you into the hook. So there's a called the hook by Ryan. And the concept is called product market fit. How do you create product market fit? The question is, how do you help customers develop a habit? What is the association between the user's emotion and your product? Now, for example, like on Tinder, you jump into Tinder. It's a terrible example because this is an example that's connected with sex. So, people will do crazy things for sex. They're not necessarily going to do crazy things to learn Chinese. I did crazy things to learn Chinese. So what was it for me? So what was the trigger? So I don't know, man. I woke up every day. I love Chinese characters. I would wake up. I would go to the university. I'd sit down in the cafeteria. I'd sit down for 6 hours a day just drawing Chinese characters. The trigger. It was this one Korean girl in my class, and we had a little competition every morning. We'd sit next to each other. She broke my digital camera. I had a digital camera, a Kodak 2.0 megapixel digital camera in 2003. She dropped it and it broke. There's no way you're going to get that fixed. In China, in 2003, you think that in China they had the technology to fix a digital Kodak camera? Yeah, right. So I just had to let it go. Anyways, the main focus was learning Chinese, and thought, probably her being angry at me, it wasn't going to help me with my process for learning Chinese. So I just let it go. Anyway, so I sat next to her every day. It took like 3 months before I had enough Chinese to find out she had a boyfriend in Korea. I visited her in Korea like years later, and she didn't have a boyfriend at that time. So that's the question, is trigger. So what's the external trigger which is going to get the user to the product? So what is it? Is it a notification? Is it like an email? So this is often where your sales funnel comes into play. And the question is, how do you get from like your advertising, your social media and advertising, your outward, what do they call that, awareness? So this goes back to your question about how to create awareness. So the first thing is you have to create an external trigger to create awareness, and then once people click, then they're going to have some kind of action. You need to get, this is where a call of action comes. You need to get them to do something, and then there needs to be some kind of variable reward, and then they're like, okay, well, now I got to do a bit of work to increase it, got to get them. So there has to be some kind of, okay, so they take an action, then there's a variable reward, then they have to do some kind of investment, and then somehow eventually there's something that they want, and then that internal trigger brings them back into your product. So you have to understand this, how this works, and you have to develop it and bring it into your product, so that that internal, so that the hook is going to get them to create the habit of tasks. Got it? Good. All right. So now the question is, how do other companies get their customers to do that? So, like I was saying, when I went to China, it was a blue ocean because I was tall and I was redheaded and I was handsome and I was speaking English, and nobody else, like there's like a sea of black hair and my head was sticking up. It was a blue ocean. And all the ladies and all the gentlemen wanted to talk to me and speak English and hang out and have fun. And it was amazing. Then I went back to Canada and like nobody even noticed me. They're like, "What? So what do you want here? Are you educated? Do you have some skills? What do you want in our country?" "What do you mean, what do I want? I'm Canadian." "Yeah, but like you're not really different than anybody else. This is a red ocean. So who are you gonna kill to get their job?" And I was like, dang it. See, the thing is like competition. You see it. We have the established competitors, we have the innovative competitors, we have substitutes. So first of all, it's the substitutes, right? So Trello, it's like Trello is not even a task list. It's like this thing where you're like, okay, here's a task, and I'm going to move it to here. It's basically they take the status bar and then they make it sideways. So you're, instead of like having a task here, so you're just changing the name of the status bar, then you move it, so you have to physically move it from these different statuses. Okay, that's Trello. Now Monday.com, ClickUp, identical. They're exactly the same. Then I just realized, well, I'm not going to be able to compete with these guys. This is a very established industry. What's the core nature of my business? Like, what is it that I'm trying to sell? What I'm trying to sell is based on Tom's work. Is I'm trying to create a process whereby managers can create objectives and then work with their team to carry out those objectives. So it's a thinking process. And the question is, who is helping you to understand what objectives you should be pursuing? And I started doing research, and I've been teaching online, teaching, coaching, however you want to put it. I've been doing this for 5 years. And in the process, like I've been asking managers, all of my students, most of my students have been managers. And I'm asking them, like, okay, so how do you come up with, how do you brainstorm? How do you come up with ideas? How do you solve problems? What business methodologies are you using? So in addition to the tools that Tom has introduced to me, I've also been doing research about other tools and other methodologies. And the only one that I haven't actually gone into to try to understand is this Six Sigma thing. A lot of people talk about Six Sigma, and it's like when I hear words like Mensa, and I'm like, how are you going to compete with Mensa? You walk into a room, the dude has like 180 IQ. What do you think you're going to do in that room? What do you think you can do to fight a guy with 180 IQ? So I just avoid things like that. I mean, maybe because I'm scared. I don't know. Maybe I feel small. My IQ is like a measly whatever it is. Like I have no idea what my IQ is, but I know it's not 180. So you know? But majority of these thinking tools, like what? Like which one? Like which thinking tool do you want? You want SWOT analysis? Like SWOT analysis is like the most famous one. Like that's the one who gets all the. And then like so I created this presentation. Like how do we what are do you understand SWOT your strengths? And then like here's all the different things we can talk about. Same thing with weaknesses, same thing with opportunities, same thing with threats. So I had the tools. Okay, so now what other tools are there? So I'm going tool by tool by tool by tool, trying to figure out what available, who are my competitors, who are the established competitors, and then what about innovative competitors? Well, guess what? Well, we have this new thing called AI. So okay, we got an issue. So AI technically could do the thing that I'm trying to sell. And in fact, if I put AI into my product, so then the question is, okay, AI is in my product, but I still need to have some kind of value proposition. All right. So this is the about monetization. And I had a student talk to me the other day, and she was like, "Yeah, you need to." So this is my product. This is actually the design of my product for getting people to this task list and then getting them to do tasks until what? So you go in this loop until your tasks are done, and then you can move over to here, and then you go here until you create a new objective. And then once you do all the objectives which you know you need to do, then maybe you need to also do some objectives that you're not sure you need to do. And but then eventually you complete all of your objectives, and then boom, you create a new project. Well, what's the issue here? What so why do I need to monetize? Because I can't afford to pay for everybody else's database. So what I'm doing is I'm providing a database where people can save projects. Within each of those projects, they can also save objectives. And within each of those objectives, they can save their scoreboard, or they can send the data to their project management tool. So how do you monetize? It took me a while to figure out that I could create a website with only these 3 modules. So and then also provide the this checklist opportunity. So if you're a person who's already using ClickUp, and so you know how to use it's called project management software, then you can go through these modules. So this one is from Tom's book. This one is also from Tom's book, and this one is something that I developed over time and also with help from my students. So we got these 3 modules for how to make decisions about what goals you should be pursuing, what objectives you should be pursuing, and then how to talk about those objectives in a way that you're able to create a robust set of tasks so that you and your team can be on the same page, and also so that you and the management level. So these 2 represent the management level of talking to the executive, and your executive is asking you the question, "Hey, have you double checked potential solutions?" And then you go through here, and this is the process of double checking potential solutions. And then you say yes. And then you go to your team and say, "Guys, we need to get on the same page and create a really great task list." So this list helps you to create that task list. That's what my product does. And how do I monetize? Well, I'm able to, what I'm doing right now is I'm creating the software so that in your local browser that these questions are stored, and this task list, it's all, you can do all of this stuff in your local browser. Now, but the issue is that once you have all of these answers saved in your local, here's my product. So now imagine that you add some tasks, and then you add some tasks here. Now, so here's my task. Now, of course, there's a couple of little issues here and there, but like, look, it opens up behind that box. And I want right now, like I'm currently making it better with Windsurf in order to, and then look, we can go to the home page. And then when you navigate between, so let's say you're having a meeting with your boss. All right, first question: how are competitors, industry leaders, or even other successful entities? All right, so you pop in your answers. Now, so what happens right now is, like, let's say we go previous. See, look, in the browser, it saves your answers. If you go to the task list, it also saves your answers. So that's the free version of the app. And then how do you monetize? Well, so the thing is that, like, where's the project level? there's no project level. I can't save like multiple projects. I can't have multiple task lists. I have to clear the session. And then after I clear the session, then it gives me the opportunity to create a new task list. So who's my target? One target audience, it's an audience who they're not really using task lists yet. They don't really know how to use a project management software. And so my ad campaigns are going to have some connection with trying to get people to use my task list. And then the other part of my target audience are people who are the people who make task lists. They like to make task lists, but they need help creating task lists, specifically managers. And what kind of managers? The managers who need to have discussions with their bosses about what objectives to pursue, and the managers who need to talk to their team to get alignment and make sure we have a really great task list. And then we create our task list. And then from there, we have two groups of peoples. So I have three main messages. Hey, if you're a manager and you're having a hard time knowing what to do, I have 10 questions that can help you figure out what direction to go in, what goals to pursue, and what your team should be doing. And it will help you when you have discussions with your boss, because it'll provide potential solutions that your company can pursue and potential goals that you can work toward. That's number one. Number two is, once you make a decision about those goals, then there's 7 questions that can help you talk to your team to make sure everybody is on the same page and everyone knows what needs to be done. And number 3, once everybody knows what needs to be done, you can also use this little section, or you can use your own project management software to create a great task list and get everybody working. That's what it is. Project Arrowhead. That's my product. Now, your question, you were saying, okay, so like, how do we do this with like this actual app? Like, how do we create, like, what does the product look like where people are like coming back to the language? So I looked at your the website that you created with Windsurf, and it's like, okay, so like, what does it look like? It's just one page. The one page has some elements, but like, what are you actually trying to do? So I don't know how you're going to monetize, because I don't see a completed product. And then once you have your completed product, then you can see how some subset of your product has some stickiness that solves people. So this actually solves people's real problem. And then eventually they're like, well, I don't want to clear the session. Like, I want to keep, I need to keep track of more than one project. Okay, well, that means you need to come and you need to buy my app, because in my app you can save projects. Then within each of those projects you see, then you can save. Every time you add text, it's going to create a new entry into our history section. You can come back to the history section. You can change the answers from previous. You don't have to delete all the answers. You can save that. But like, I have to have, so that's the thing that, like, people are going to send me messages like, hey, I don't want to clear the session. I need a way to save the projects. And I'm like, okay, it's called Pro version. And then eventually people are going to be like, well, I wanted, like, I need somebody on my team to update something in the app, but like, I can't share the page with other people. So then we got a team version, you see? So this like literally took me 10 years to design this. And now I have a design. Once you have the design, then you can start moving into the. So this is something called inbound marketing. And inbound marketing is the basic idea that want to get people to become what you need. Some strangers. So what you said, you have your target audience. You have to understand the characteristics of your potential customers, and then you have to attract them. You have to somehow create awareness. There you see her. So, and I always ask my students, like, hey, so like, imagine there's a girl in a club, and then what is her strategy? See, in many cultures, there seems to be some type of push that the men are supposed to be more proactive when initiating a conversation, and the women have to find ways to attract attention. Now, I don't know if that's fair or if that's right, but I've noticed that in some cultures that's the case. So the question is, you see a girl, there's a girl in the club, what does she do to gain attention? And she's got a couple of strategies. One strategy is touching her hair. So movement, touching hair, is something that might attract attention. The things that she wears might attract attention. If she stands like directly behind the person who you're talking to, it may create attention. If she if she laughs, it might draw attention. All right. So you create awareness. Now, I think your question was more like specifically, how are you going to create awareness? So that means we don't necessarily need to go through the whole inbound marketing cycle. Needless to say, let's just say that the first thing is we need to come up with some strategy for people to get to know you and try to like you. And once they get to know you and they like you, then they're going to click. So awareness, it's about advertising, social media, it's about finding where your customers are, getting in front of your customers, all of the different activities you have in order to get you in front of your customers so they can get to know you and then they can like you. Result of that is going to be a click. Once they click, then they're going to go to your landing page. That could be a lead magnet. It could be your sales page. It could be your home page. It could be whatever it's going to be. And then it needs to have something that shows some solutions, and it explains that the solutions that are being provided are in order to help these specific needs. And then they can compare your product with other products. Right? So it doesn't matter how you dress the pig, you have to understand the elements of your value proposition, and then you have to understand how other organizations are providing solutions for solutions for that element of that value proposition. So you have to get your product down to the point where you have a very specific value proposition and you can articulate it. Your advertising and also your homepage have to both address the needs that people have and the solutions that you're offering. And then they're going to be comparing what you've done with other stuff that they've seen before. And over time, they have to learn how to like, trust, and eventually try your product. That's why I have the free version of my app, because they're going to be looking at my social media. Eventually, they're going to be clicking. They're going to go into my website. They're going to see, okay, so here's a task list I can use my task list. Or, okay, I got a meeting with my boss, and like they said, here's 5 questions that can help me with my meeting with my boss. Or I got a team meeting, and here's 7 questions that can help you create really great to-do lists with your team, right? So my solution is clear. And then maybe I might also introduce some other solutions. Okay, so here's the competitor, and this is how they provide a solution. This is what SWOT analysis says, and this is what Porter's 5 Forces says, and this is what Six Sigma says, and this is what. So I can. This is my coaching mentality. These are the other coaching mentalities, and then so you can obviously. I know all of them. I went through everyone's work, and this is what I think is more useful. So what do you think? And then they're like, either they're like, yes, I've also been through everybody else's work and I agree that your work is better, or they're just like, well, is it easy to use? And then we're into the hook. So how do I actually hook them? So they try it and then they're like, oh, I got a result. And then how do I get them back? So then I need to figure out how to give them an external trigger. So I need to send them an email. I need to have some kind of notification. I need to have some gamification. I have to have something in that website that gets them to come back. And then eventually we're developing a habit. Now, once you start to have these strategies, them into some kind of category, right? So here's awareness. So specifically, what are your strategies for creating awareness? Are you doing Facebook ads? Are you doing Google ads? Are you doing Instagram stories? So what is your actual process for creating awareness? And then you have your engage stage. So this is going to be your lead magnet, or this is going to be your homepage, or this is going to be use our website, or this is going to be something. And then the question is, how do you then, and then you also have your external triggers here. So how do you get them back into the product? And then eventually they use your free product to the extent that they like it, and then eventually then they want to buy. So then they subscribe. Wait, no, the engage is the lead magnet page, and subscribe is here it is. So there's follow-up emails, and then eventually the result is here. They register. So if they don't register, then they're back into the retargeting ads. So they're in this loop until they unsubscribe or they register. And then once they register, then you want to like click the offer link. Eventually you're going to go from the 7-day challenge. So this is your free product. Then you have to get them from the free product into the paid product. Then once they get into the paid product, then they purchase, and then they got then there's some upsell, I guess, here to the deluxe. So you have to actually map that out. All right, now that you've mapped that out, you're starting to get some data. So the assumption is that you have a product, right? So that's number one. You have a product. Number two, you have social media and advertising. Number three, you have the ability to convert people who click on your website and get them to start using your product, your free version of the product. You have some methodology for getting them from the free product into the paid product. Now, once you have all those things, then the data starts coming in, the numbers. You see, here's my numbers for my videos. Apparently, the hours watched have gone down a little bit. All right, now we got the data. So then the question is, what do you do with that data? Now, we were talking about deliver practice. All right, so in the corporate menu, remember we had the coach and we had the analyst. So we're going to start to measure. What are we going to measure? So first we talk to the coach. The coach says we need to measure data entry. We need to measure analyze data. We need to measure trigger actions. So the first thing is, do we have the data? Yes or no? Everything we've talked about to this point is to get us to this step. Are we getting data? So you see, there's so much work to do even before you ever get to this point where we're getting data. Now we got the data, and now we need to optimize the system. So we need to make sure that there's some trigger for entering data into the system. We have to find it. We have to make the change in the system. We need to enforce it so that we got the data in the system. Once we got the data in the system, then we have to learn how to understand our data. And then we need to figure out, okay, so which data points are more heavy than others? Why did we lose the sale? Where and why? What's the quality of our data? How do we combine our data so we can have some kind of formulas? See, we're trying to answer this question. How do we increase sales using our data? And then eventually we're going to begin new processes. We're going to automate processes. We're going to penalize bad habits. We're going to understand requirements and change them. And then you can see down here are the actual elements. So then you have to define, okay, so what specifically are we going to do to punish our employees if they don't enter their data? Or what methods or routines are we going to create so that people are able to enter their data? Or what kind of notification system are we going to do? So you see, it's all the same thing. It's just these patterns. Now we could break it down into like for example here. So here's this begin a new process. All right, so it doesn't matter if we're talking about data or if we're talking about the big picture of like, trying to establish new habits. It goes back to Tom's work in Crucial Insight. And here are the 3 ideas. There's actually 6 ideas in his chapter called state styles. And in the state styles, we have this thing. So here's the goal, and here's the work that we're doing to achieve the goal. So for example, the first thing in the sales funnel is something called identify the target. And you said like, how do you choose your target audience? That's a good question. In addition to the things that we talked about so far, I don't know the answer to that. If we talk about language learning, like what specific, I don't know, like it's going to take some time to actually. So right now it's 0. Like I don't have any action for understanding how you're going to define your target audience. But I do know that what you could do is you can use AI, you can use different tools, you can watch some YouTube videos, you can try all kinds of different things in order to figure out how to define your target audience. And then eventually over time, you're going to find that there are some processes that you could try this process and you can try that process. Some of them will be more successful and some of them will be less successful. And then eventually you're going to have some kind of process. So process building always begins with not really doing anything and then just trying things out haphazardly and then doing some A/B testing. And then eventually you have a process. So how do you identify eventually? Okay, so you're going to have a goal. Every week, I'm going to identify 50 target customers. And then what are you going to do with them? I'm going to locate them. So for example, I had one student, what he would do is he would go into LinkedIn and he would find the main decision maker and 3 other people from that company. So he had like a very specific process for how to locate the target. He had the platform and also the strategy. And then you have your attraction. So how do you attract attention? So like maybe you're doing nothing and then, or maybe you have a process. And then next it's how do you get them to bright? And then how do you place the hook and how do you reel them in? So all of these things are related to process building. Okay, so specifically when business, what you want to do is you want to create a website that is helping people to study language. And I have my own thoughts about potentially what a business like that might look like. I think that basically when you learn language, you have two elements. One's called theory and practice. One is called theory and one is called practice. And then you have something called text and you have audio. Language, that's all we have. We have text language, we have audio language. So when it comes to language, there's only two elements. And then we have the ability to teach text, and we have the ability to teach using audio. And then you have to practice. So you have some text exercises and you have some audio exercises. Now, what I did was I used AI and I created, remember at the beginning I was talking about these guys, Brain, Lisa, and and Pinky. So what I did was, and I created a collaboration so that it understands the nature of Lisa, Pinky, and the Brain. And it also understands the nature of my software and modules. And I put all of these things into a, so the AI has access to a functionality called liaison. So this is about process facilitator, strategic analysis, document planning, documentation, conceptual, prompt engineer. They also have access to these things. So it's the architect is the systems architect, technology strategist, technical risk assessor, innovation lead. And then specifically for this language learning app, I've designed these different personas as Lingo Learn, DevSeth, Blogsmith, Engage, Quality Resource. So this is me. I'm coach. I don't actually put myself as CEO. I just put myself as coach because I'm trying to understand how to use these elements and create exercises so that we can improve the categories. So my main focus is coach. Who's the CEO? I don't know. What does it mean to be the CEO? What's the direction of the company? See, the thing is that we don't actually have a direction for the company yet. Therefore, we don't have the CEO. We're not managing people and processes with infrastructure. So we don't even have a manager yet. All we have right now is a coach. And I'm trying to use these guys in order to help me. So that brings to our Gemini. So I've already calibrated this chat window. So hello, Arrowhead. This is the user PM. You are being initiated as my primary AI partner. So our collaboration is going to be using these calibration documents. And then after we go through the calibration documents, here's the first AI vibe coding blog platform. Here's the team operations manual. Here's the key decisions log. Here's the active sprint operation. And then here's the project sprint review log. So those are the calibration documents. So now the AI is fully calibrated. Is there anything you want to ask or clarify from the previous Arrowhead? Okay. Were there any specific nuances, pending thoughts, or subtle shifts in perspective from your very last interaction with the previous Arrowhead instance regarding the upcoming VOT, blah, blah, blah? This is just my app. Those are the different modules: vision, objective, touch base, scoreboard, brainstorming, choose modules. That's a very insightful question from the new Arrowhead. So I copied this and I pasted it to the previous version. So this is me calibrating a new instance. What did I name this thing? It doesn't work. I don't think it has a name. All right. Anyway, so the result is that I took this textbook, the chapter 1 of this French textbook, and then I asked it to simulate a conversation about each section of the textbook exercises. Now, then it does that. So it's like, so what happens is it actually does it. So we have Lingo Learn, Blogsmith, Prompt Engineer, Engage. So we have all these, we have this little simulated conversation between all of our different personas. And then after we have this this simulated conversation, then the Arrowhead manager is going to now have a conversation with liaison and architect, and then they're going to come up with, now they're going through the choose module from my app to talk about the scenarios considered, the similarities and differences, the important aspects of the decision, evaluation differences, decision and supporting. So I guess at this point, I'm kind of the CEO because I'm asking them to run the simulation and come up with an answer. So then they're going to create the blog article or the series. So here's the series of blog articles. So they're saying, all right, so post 1, bonjour, saying hello and asking names in French. Number 2, meet my friend, introduce others and nationalities. 2, or vous, getting a handle on French pronouns. Who's that? Asking qu'est-ce que. I used to have French lessons at 11 o'clock. That's why. In fact, did I have a French lesson today? Quelle heure? Bal. My French teacher calls me Bal. Après, she asked if I'm going to meet at 11 o'clock. Exactly. So we used to always meet at 11 o'clock. She actually sent me a message asking if we're going to meet at 11 o'clock. But I have no idea. She didn't send me a message. The verb être, your first key to being in French. What is your name? Mastering s'appeler. He or she, a peek into French nouns. Ask nicely, simple French questions, vocabulary snatch, people and introductions, quick practice. So what you can see is that like I automated the process for, I can take any textbook. I mean, of course, this is the 1.0 version. So I'm not saying that this is the end all and be all of like how to do this work. I'm saying that I created this like a group of personas, and I can simulate conversations within those personas so that by uploading a textbook, it can divide that chapter into 10 blog articles. So which gives us a starting point. And then from there, what we can do is we can then design like what exactly does that blog article look like? And then also, what are the elements of that blog article? And then what are the AI elements of that blog article? So what you can see is that I'm at the beginning stages for creating a product. So I hope that answers your questions. It's been a wonderful exercise to kind of just explain all of my in an organized way. And we'll talk to you later. I'm trying to figure out how to get out of this video. Peace.